From LPM,
Louisville Public Media.
Support for this podcast comes from LG&E, with a reminder that the warning signs of a gas leak are the smell of rotten eggs, dead plants near healthy plants, or a hissing sound. Leave immediately and call 911. More gas safety tips at lge-ku.com/gas safety.
How can I help you today?
Hey, I need to talk about my loan.
No problem.
So I got the email. Sandy Spring Bank is becoming
Atlantic Union Bank. That's right.
And will you still be
Your banker? Of course.
More branches and ATMs?
Way more.
Still community driven?
Still live here, still give here.
Mobile app?
Easy. Everything right at your fingertips.
And what about my business?
Always here to help you reach your goals.
Sandy Spring Bank is becoming Atlantic Union Bank, October 2025. Same bankers you love with even more to offer.
Welcome to On Track. I'm Aisha Jaffer. It's Family Literacy Month, and we're taking a look at literacy in Kentucky, what's improving, where challenges remain, and how families can get help. Joining me is Dr. Felicia C. Smith, President and CEO of the National Center for Families Learning in Louisville. She began as an elementary classroom teacher, then moved into leadership roles with the Collaborative Center for Literacy Development at the University of Kentucky, the Kentucky Department of Education, and at Jefferson County Public Schools. Nationally, she's held roles as the Senior Program Officer for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Director of Global Delivery at the National Geographic Society. She holds a doctorate in educational leadership and a master's in elementary education with an emphasis on literacy development. Dr. Smith, thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Can you describe what family literacy means and how programs that include both adults and children differ for those serving just children?
Sure. One of the things that's really important to know about family literacy is that at the National Center for Families Learning, we believe in multigeneration learning. And that means bringing together parenting adults or caregivers and children so that they're learning side by side and experiencing and gaining those skills together. The National Center for Family Literacy's Family Literacy Model began in 1989 and has spread all over the country. That model has 4 components that focuses on children's education, typically what's offered in the school or either in community-based organizations. Parent time, where parents can come together and learn new skills for literacy or new skills for upskilling their experiences. Adult education, which is also where parents can pursue general equivalency of high school diploma or a GED or either some other certifications that help them get a better job, as well as parent and child time together, where parents and children come together and reinforce the skills that they've learned in order for them to be able to do those skills at home and practice those skills so that literacy for the parents, but also for the children, begins to increase.
So it's kind of like a whole experience, looking at the whole picture and improving it kind of all across.
That's exactly right. Most of the time you hear educators talk about the whole child. Well, at the National Center for Families Learning, we believe in the whole family. We believe that the whole family should be learning together in order for those skills to develop and then break down cycles of poverty, which we know literacy has a direct link. Literacy and learning has a direct link for breaking down poverty.
And then in clear terms, when adults are learning alongside their kids, how does that impact children's outcomes?
Well, we've heard from many, many parents over 36 years where children see their parents actually gaining new skills, kind of going back to school themselves to improve their education attainment. And the children begin to see their parents develop those skills, which then reinforces to the children that they too can improve their learning and their skills. The other thing that's really important for children to see is that children actually have a partner at home then. When parents gain new skills, they can work closely with their children as they're developing their literacy and language skills.
And you started your career in the classroom. What signs did you find show up early on when reading is going well for a child and conversely when learning to read is not going so well?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because as an early learning teacher, I began my career with first grade children. And I could see the difference in many of those children who had a lot of exposure to language and literacy experiences. They usually began to read earlier or either came to school reading already. And that's because their parents or grandparents likely read with them and helped them develop those early literacy skills. We cannot underestimate the power of parents being their children's first teacher and exposing them to lots of experiences, books and plays and songs. All of those early literacy skills are so critical. However, in the classroom of, 24 or 32, oftentimes, you would see young children who struggled, especially when children were not identified with a learning disability or developmentally delayed in some area of language or literacy. If children were coming to school struggling in reading, we saw a lot of times that those children had not had the same level of exposure. Oftentimes when I would meet with those parents, not just for parent-teacher conference, but oftentimes just having conversations with parents would also reveal that they struggle to read. And what we know from the data is that many children who have parents who struggle to read, oftentimes 72% of those children from parents who struggle to read also have struggles in learning to read and literacy. A lot of that is also coming from children who live in poverty conditions. And so that's the importance of early literacy skills, right? So those teachers early on need to know what's happening with children, what's happening in their home, how those skills have developed or not in the home, so that then when they're in the classroom for those 8 hours of day, they know that they need to double down on some of those early literacy skills for children. That's what happened when I was a first grade teacher, and that's what actually catapulted my career in wanting to be a literacy specialist and helping young people gain greater access and opportunities along with their parenting adults or caregivers.
Because you saw it right there at the ground level.
I saw it from the ground level, and my goal as a teacher was to just change that trajectory for the child.
So what work is the National Center for Families Learning doing in Kentucky right now in regards to literacy? And how do families usually get connected to this work?
Yeah, so the National Center for Families Learning, due to a strong relationship with the Kentucky Department of Education, has been focused on family engagement efforts across the state. And we have also worked very closely with the Governor's Office of Early Childhood Education, because we know that when children get off to the right start and develop these early literacy and language skills, that they have a better chance of being prepared for kindergarten. So we work very closely with the Governor's Office of Early Childhood Education through a grant that came through the federal level called the Preschool Development Grant. And that grant has given the National Center for Families Learning an opportunity to spread and scale the family literacy model that I referenced earlier, but also some play with purpose groups. So many counties across the state of Kentucky are childcare deserts, which means that many families don't have opportunities for their children 0 to 4 and getting them into organized setting to learn those early skills or even to socialize with children of their own age. Because those childcare deserts are present across the state of Kentucky, those children do not have access to high-quality childcare or early learning settings. At the National Center for Families Learning, we have been doubling down on our efforts to provide playgroups for parents in those childcare desert settings so that those parents can bring their children, their babies, to learn early learning skills. And again, because we believe in multi-generation learning, parents are learning right alongside their children so that they can go and carry those same experiences forward when they're not together in those play groups. So things that we would probably imagine come natural in conversation, such as taking turns, such as pointing out and counting and asking the colors of things in the grocery store, or just having books and understanding how to read those books to their children at home and how to ask questions about the characters and how the storyline develops. Those are all the kinds of skills that are taught and gained through this Play with Purpose experience. And so the National Center for Families Learning is not only doing family engagement work with schools and districts across the state, we're doing those play groups as well as family literacy programs.
So it sounds like it's about creating a space as well in those desert areas.
That's exactly right. Creating a space for high quality early learning experiences matters most. And the state of Kentucky has really been pushing on preschool and pre-K for all. And I sit on this governor's task force for preschool for all. And there are many people that sit around that table who are devoted and committed to creating those spaces and putting out recommendations so that our legislature understand if we want a strong Kentucky, if we want a brighter Kentucky, we need to make deep investments in early learning so that children get a strong start from the beginning. The mayor here in Louisville has also had a major investment through some of the federal dollars that he received to the city, and he's made a very significant investment in spreading and scaling the kinds of Play with Purpose programs and play groups all across the city of Louisville. So we've been seeing more momentum in building early learning and early literacy skills across the state.
And what have you found to be the most impactful family learning approaches for the best literacy outcomes?
You know, family literacy is a model that has spread not only here in Kentucky, but all across the country. At the National Center for Families Learning, we work in 180 communities across the country, which has impacted 4.5 million families since the beginning of our center's genesis. And family literacy has been proven through research and evaluation to be a strong component for families to increase their skills in literacy development, workforce skills, which we know are critical in today's time, but also it's had an impact on school attendance. There's not a superintendent across this state and across this country that isn't dealing with chronic absenteeism at the moment. And family literacy has been able to have a positive impact on school attendance. We have some evaluations from the city of Detroit where that was proven. But family literacy has had an impact on the child outcomes as well as the adult outcomes. And we believe that makes it a unique model in transforming what's happening across the state and across the country.
So what do you find then to be the most common barriers to making this work have those positive outcomes, and what has helped you lower those barriers?
Yeah, I think one of the barriers now that we're experiencing, and we're seeing more of this in the last 3 to 4 years, but it is actually heightened in the current climate, is parents actually gaining access through having transportation to get to the locations where family literacy and adult learning may be happening, or having childcare. That's what we believe is important with the model with family literacy, because children can come with their parents. If they are in typical traditional adult education programs, there's oftentimes not childcare on site. And so we believe that that is why family literacy is really important, because children can also attend with their parents. We've also seen that the workforce, businesses and industry are also doing their part in trying to create spaces where parents or caregivers can gain better skills and gain certification programs. That has also been a kind of a barrier. And we're seeing that working more closely with industry and businesses to provide those opportunities, either through, quote, the lunch hour or either afterwards, or even in hosting their own academy, has been a great way in overcoming the barriers for adult learners and for caregivers to improve upon their skills while their children are also there improving upon their skills. So there are several barriers that we're trying to overcome, creating incentives, but there are also opportunities there.
Now, I'm looking at some of the national news. The latest National Assessment of Educational Progress reading results put Kentucky about in line with the national average, with only partial recovery since the pandemic. What do you think that tells us about where we're at right now?
Yeah, I think one of the things is, we've had a strong showing on the National Assessment of Education Progress and kept pace. I think one of the things with the changes in resources that are available to districts and schools, we're going to need to see the state of Kentucky double down on literacy opportunities for districts and schools and resources for schools, particularly professional development, of which this General Assembly has made a good investment in the science of reading and professional development associated with that for teachers. But professional development, curriculum materials, intervention materials, those are all still in great need. And as we see the demand of outside or other variables costing the state, there's only so much that can go around. When those resources begin to decline in the investment in education, we will see declines in education. So it's keeping pace like other states, particularly other southern states, in making major investments in education. That's the only way that we'll be able to continue to stay the course and increase and be above the national average.
And right now you're saying those resources, we're still at pace with those. Those aren't declining.
Well, there have been declines in education resources over the years, but I've seen recently in the science of reading investment that our legislature has made, as well as in professional development for those resources in districts. That has been a positive thing. But I think the call to action for this legislature is not to lose ground on education investments in spite of some of the other ways in which we're going to be looking at making those investments in other areas because of the current climate. We just cannot lose ground on making an investment in education. And this governor has made that a priority over the years, and I'm just hopeful that the legislature will also continue to make that same priority as they have. Investing in pre-K would be one of those ways in which they would demonstrate pre-K and child care are important for this state. It would also draw young people to this state. If you think about that, young people who are young parents want to go to states where they have that type of investment. So for all the reasons you can think about, education is the key driver for a brighter Kentucky.
Looking at Kentucky, what do you think is improving in literacy, and where do you see the biggest challenges right now?
I think some of the big challenges right now are just ensuring that districts and schools have enough resources to be able to provide intervention supports to young children. We know that, we're seeing changes at the federal level, particularly in the closing of the Department of Education, which can be controversial, but also in the types of resources that are typically made available, for example, supports to students with disabilities. We know that that is going to be critical for the state of Kentucky, and understanding that those resources not waver for children who are developmentally delayed or who have a disability. Ensuring that we invest in early learning and pre-K is really important, and in curriculum and professional development resources.
And what do you think Kentucky's doing well so far on literacy?
Again, I just mentioned about the legislators' investment in science of reading. Kentucky is among many of the other states who have made that investment. But it's not just about the science of reading. It's, understanding that that is an early focus as well for elementary age students, but making an investment in literacy across the age continuum is really important. So not only investing in elementary K-3 reading, but investing in middle school and high school, secondary reading and literacy, because reading changes over time. And children need to be able to have, and educators need to be able to have those resources available so that when children come to those higher grades, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, still struggling to read, that those educators actually understand what resources they have available or interventions that they need available to get children back on track. So making an investment in literacy pre-K through 12th grade including adult learning is really important. I just published a blog with the former president of the Southern Regional Education Board that focused on longitudinal literacy. And while investments in early K through 3 are absolutely critical to get children off to a great start, we need the same types of investments in secondary as well.
For those who are not familiar, you mentioned science and reading. Can you explain what that is?
The science of reading is really focused on how, bringing research into the field of education and literacy to ensure that educators understand the science of how the brain works around the teaching of reading. And that then focuses on essential components of reading, like phonemic awareness and phonics education, and how those connect to fluency and comprehension are really important. Those are all ways in which young people need to understand. If children are not able to understand letters and decoding and encoding, that is critical for teachers to be able to provide those experiences in the classroom. So it's really about the science of how to bring together those essential components of reading so that teachers understand how to teach reading, that reading just doesn't come naturally, but it is something that students need to be taught.
So we talked about other states doing different things. States like California and Indiana updated their reading policies this year, leaning into evidence-based instruction, early screening, and stronger teacher training. What policy shift do you think would be most meaningful for improving literacy in Kentucky?
Yeah, I think following those states and ensuring that we have the policies now around the teaching of reading and understanding the science of reading. So that is a plus for sure. But we are seeing double digits really increase in Indiana and in some of the other states in the southern region. And it is because of those early investments, but also making an investment in out-of-school time so that children who are spending time, after the school day, they have quality places to go so that those investments can also help reinforce what's happening in the school. That is the way in which the National Center for Families Learning has been engaged as an out-of-school partner for ensuring that the curriculum extends beyond the school walls. So I see that in some of those states. Investments in higher education and helping higher ed understand their role and responsibilities and making those investments in helping faculty do greater research on literacy and education, but also help transform what's happening in the curricular and higher education. But I would also say making investments in intervention. In Kentucky, where we saw the greatest gains, we've seen major investments in intervention as well.
An intervention meaning, can you explain that?
Yep, interventions in schools where children have additional opportunities beyond just the classroom instruction, but they are actually getting additional opportunities for the teaching of reading and literacy.
If a parent or caregiver is listening and needs literacy support for themselves or their child, where should they start?
I would always say start with your child's teacher. Educators are really the source of information. The district can provide additional support and information. So, those individuals are closest to the children, right? So start and build a deeper partnership with your child's teacher. That's why we believe at the National Center for Families Learning that parents are partners in their child's education. At the University of Louisville, there is a center that has received funding from the legislature to focus on reading research. So it's the Kentucky Reading Research Center. And you can go there by visiting their website and finding out the most important information around reading and research in the teaching of reading and literacy. So that's another place I would encourage folks to turn. You can also come to our website at familieslearning.org, and we have some resources there from birth to adulthood on different programs that are offered across the state.
And for educators listening, what resources would you point them to?
I am really hopeful that our districts across the state are providing professional development opportunities. So educators should be asking, their principals for opportunities for professional development, either within their district or beyond. It is important sometimes for folks to be able to go to different places, go to higher performing districts to see what practices are in place, go to conferences to get, some experience and learn new people, become a part of a larger network of people who are engaged in this work, but also seek out professional development opportunities themselves. I did that as a teacher and helped build my skills and then focused on literacy throughout my career.
Well, Dr. Smith, thank you so much for being here with us today.
I appreciate the opportunity to share with you all today.
On Track is produced by Louisville Public Media. Our production team includes Michelle Tyreen Johnson, Laura Ellis, and me, Aisha Jaffer, with support from Sarah Kelly and Alex Biscardi. Our music is by Kojin Toshiro. Find more at LouisvilleOnTrack.org. And remember, being kind is free. That's the start of community. Thanks for listening.
Support for this podcast comes from LG&E and KU, who know that when the lights go out, it can feel like a full court press. But staying in the know is an easy win. Update your phone number in the LG&E and KU mobile app or in My Account. If the power goes out, you'll get play-by-play texts from 454-358 with outage updates, safety information, and time estimates for power restoration. Can't text? No problem. They'll call the landline on your account with the same updates, so you're never left in the dark. More at lgne-ku.com/outages.
Streaming is changing the way we watch live sports, and your internet connection can be the difference between catching the game-winning touchdown as it happens or hearing about it from your neighbor's cheers. That's why Comcast is building the network of the future. Using cutting-edge AI and edge computing technology, we're bringing fans closer to the action in stunning high definition with ultra-low latency. It's not just fast, it's game-changing. Learn more at ComcastCorporation.com/sports.